So I just read the news that Steve Cropper passed away. And I'm reminded that Bobby Whitlock, also a Memphis legend, also Stax associated, passed away a couple of months ago. And in the beginning of this year, Sam Moore from Sam and Dave passed away. And so I'm just thinking, man, 2025 has been pretty devastating for Memphis legends musically. I mean, Steve Cropper, if you don't know, was the guitarist in Booker T and the MGs. That was the in-house Stax band. So Steve Cropper backed up, he was playing on Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay. He was playing on Sam and Dave. Again, Sam Moore passed away this year. Sam and Dave's Hold On, I'm Coming, and I'm a Soul Man. And after his whole career at Stax, Steve Cropper, was a member of the Blues Brothers, that Dan Aykroyd Belushi movie. And it was kind of a fictitious but also real band because they had, Donald Duck Dunn of Booker T and the MGs and other real musicians backing them up. So it was a very formidable musical outlet that just happened to be a part of an SNL skit and then a movie down the line. So Steve Cropper was also a go-to guy, like in terms of being a session musician for lots of musicians. Like you look at the list of people he collaborated with. This guy was one of the greatest guitarists ever. Like I think Keith Richards cites him as the greatest guitarist ever. You look at any list, that's a serious list, you'll see Steve Cropper somewhere. He should be somewhere in that top 15, top 20, if not higher. But not only that, Steve Cropper was a serious songwriter. Like he was basically co-writing a lot of those Stax hits in the mid to late 60s. In fact, when Otis Redding tragically died in the plane crash, Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay wasn't a finished song. They had a few rough takes and parts that were supposed to be replaced and so forth. It was Steve Cropper that not only co-wrote the song and actually, wrote a lot of the lyrics related to the Dock of the Bay, but Steve Cropper was the one who fully produced that and basically took it from where it was and not only, played on it guitar-wise, obviously, but he's the one who finished the song in the wake of Otis Redding passing. So Otis Redding wasn't even alive to see the release of what ended up being his biggest classic, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. But yeah, that song's release and a lot of its success is due to the greatness of Steve Cropper. And one thing that's, kind of interesting and sad about these 2025 passings among Memphis legends is that Bobby Whitlock, who I'd mentioned passed away a few months ago, he was actually the first white artist signed to Stax. So he learned how to play keyboard and he would go on to play with Eric Clapton on like Derek and the Dominoes. That's the album behind me that featured Layla, also featured Dwayne Allman on guitar. But Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs is the name of the album. But Bobby Whitlock was basically the co-founder of that Derek and the Dominoes band for that short time that they were a band with him and Eric Clapton. And Eric Clapton cites Bobby Whitlock as being the most energetic sideman he'd ever seen or performed with. But Bobby Whitlock, and he would also play on George Harrison's classic All Things Must Pass. That album also heavily features Bobby Whitlock's work on keys. And he obviously played the Hammond organ, but he learned how to play the Hammond organ and piano by studying and watching Booker T. Jones of Booker T and the MGs, basically being the younger guy in the studio, just kind of hanging around and seeking mentorship and just learning about music and about professionalism, basically being taken under the wing of these more established and professional musicians at Stax. So that's how Bobby Whitlock came up. Like, I think a lot of people kind of figured that Bobby Whitlock was British because of his associations with Eric Clapton and George Harrison. And he also played in Delaney and Bonnie, but he's from Memphis. And so, yeah, he was a Stax artist. And actually, as his mentor, Steve Cropper, take note of that. Steve Cropper was Bobby Whitlock's mentor, and they passed away in 2025 within a few months of each other. But as Steve Cropper and Donald Duck Dunn and the other members of Booker T and the MGs are prepping the first solo release for Bobby Whitlock, he actually left Stax at that time to join Delaney and Bonnie, who were at the time a pretty hot, LA-based singer-songwriter duo that had a cool stretch for a couple of years. And so Bobby Whitlock ended up touring heavily with Delaney and Bonnie. That's actually where he met Eric Clapton. And Bobby Whitlock was so good and so good of a performer, so good on the keys, that when I think it was Derek and the Dominoes were touring, Elton John was opening for them, and Elton John learned stage charisma, stage presence. He had admittedly learned these things and learned about the performance aspect by studying Bobby Whitlock from the side of the stage. So yeah, we lost a lot of history here. And Sam Moore, obviously, of Sam and Dave, the duo that sang Hold On, I'm Coming and I'm a Soul Man, among other songs. And they were basically one of the biggest artists to come out of Stax. So yeah, legendary label, Memphis base, and 3 of the major heavy hitters associated with Stax Records all passed away in 2025. Sam Moore, then Bobby Whitlock several months later, and then a few months later, now Steve Cropper. Yeah, pretty sad year when it comes to Memphis musicianship. And they were one of a couple or a few, I would say, Memphis-based in-house bands. You also had the High Rhythm section that did, Ann Peebles and Al Green. So there was a lot of music coming out of Memphis. That's why I always state Memphis as one of the most influential and most important musical cities in the United States throughout the history of music. I look at Memphis as being like in the top 5 to 7 perhaps. But yeah, I just wanted to state, rest in peace, Sam Moore, rest in peace, Bobby Whitlock, rest in peace, Steve Cropper. Yeah, that was pretty major. Steve Cropper's actually in the Rock Hall of Fame, and he's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame. Yeah, Steve Cropper, look him up. He was one of the most sought after guitarists in the world. He wrote and co-wrote some of the biggest, rock and rock adjacent R&B soul songs of the 60s, mid to late 60s. He wrote Wilson Pickett's In the Midnight Hour. And again, I mentioned that he wrote and co-wrote Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay. So yeah, rest in peace to 3 Memphis legends, all passed away in 2025. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Sam Moore of Sam and Dave. By the way, Isaac Hayes also got his start at Stax Records. And Booker T. Jones is still with us. He's still alive. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Sam Moore, Bobby Whitlock, and Steve Cropper. We lost a lot of history this year. Please let me know your thoughts on these fantastic artists, musicians in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.